So Carpenter's Gothic by William Gaddis is a 1985 novel. And this is my first Gaddis. I had heard of him before. I think I put him kind of on my radar. Probably not more than maybe a few months ago. So he's definitely. But I did hear about the recognitions, which I intend to read next. I've heard other people approaching his work in a chronological sense, like they'll go to like his first novels first, and then slowly move their way down. And I kind of did a similar thing with Cormac McCarthy, but even then with him, I kind of like skipped around a little bit, and like I read Blood Meridian first, um, and then it was a little while till I got to the Orchard Keeper. Um, but yeah, there's somebody else who I did that with, but for the most part, yeah, this I don't know if that will affect my later readings, but yeah, Carpenter's Gothic is basically like the title says, is like a gothic tale, and that kind of with a bit of horror but there's not a lot of there's nothing like overly like flamboyant about that term. It's more so like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. The whole thing's pretty dry, and it like in a good way. Like it's almost like a gritty, realistic type of tale in some sense. And definitely a lot of like timely things going on, like right around the time of the '80s and stuff reminiscent of like maybe the '60s uh, um, kind of misogyny and racism, and people still trying to stick these old ideals that are very damning and like kind of ineffectual, and like trying to really hold on to them. Remind me a lot of Faulkner and his like kind of disillusionment of like his Southern pride and holding on to the Confederacy as if it's like the only thing that just like this vestige of the past, and never moving on. Same thing with O'Connor, and maybe a bit of like Raymond Chandler too. Or I'm sorry, Raymond Carver. Sorry. Um, so yeah, Carpenter's Gothic talks about a married couple. Um, Concerning right off the bat, we're in the middle of like a very heated debate. Not a debate, but more of an argument coming from the husband, Paul. Paul Booth, I believe his last name is, and Liz Booth, his wife. And she is constantly destined, right from the get go in the novel, to be in his shadow, to just constantly be at the behest of every single whim that this insufferable guy uh, is capricious enough to, like everything. I mean, he is probably one of the worst characters. I mean, the way that Gaddis paints this guy is like super backwards, very uh, dominating, opinionated, outspoken to the core, just like completely just like there's no redeeming thing that at least I could find in Paul at all. He is so yeah, he is this works in this kind of, I'm not sure what his actual trade is. He's working in this paper, and he does a lot of like public relational stuff. So he's constantly in the public eye, running around, and sometimes he's depicted as going across into different countries, and sometimes like there's a big thing going on with Africa at some point. I believe like a conspiracy kind of it got pretty I don't know what the term is, like it got a little bit out of hand. Like it's hard to describe exactly the exact details of what he did over there, but he did get involved with this kind of very ugly kind of affairs of like the African tribes there or something, and he's kind of stuck up to his knee because there's like a um, tragedy that actually happened with the one of the preachers, Reverend Und, I think, is has baptized, or one of his cohorts baptizes a person, and then an older person, and they drown, I think, or maybe it was a younger person. I'm not sure, but like it's a very ugly disaster, and for the good part of the novel, Paul is just going on and on. In most of these things, like you have paragraphs, long unending sentences, uh, though it's not quite as long as maybe something Pynchon might have written with like the longest, I think, sentence, but like some definitely they don't quite rival that, but they are they really do put Yeah, they really do give them money's worth. I don't know where I was going with that saying, but like these just very long ramblings of Paul, who's like a very, like he claims to be super devout, like religious. He's like, oh, we gotta, really take it to the, show these people what we're worth, and we're gonna really show these evolutionary, these evolution. That was a big thing too, like the evolutionary debates and like all the stuff happening in schools, like, I can't remember there's something versus there was some kind of court class like on the veracity or the legal whether it is right to teach evolution in schools versus creationism, and that was a very heated topic in this house too. Obviously, Gaddis, kind of inserted some stuff of his own stuff, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't really know too much about him, at least not yet. But he was, personally kind of anti kind of teaching very dogmatic kind of creationism in schools, I think, and this kind of showed a little bit too obviously at times, I think. But maybe that's just his style. Maybe I'm still trying to get acquainted with it. But yeah, Paul goes on for so long about like just like this kid, we have a PR disaster. It's just like people are not. He's constantly just like ordering his wife around, and completely insufferable, like good for nothing. Just as like he's drinker. He's a chronic cigarette. Like he's a chain smoking, and he's just not doing his liver or his lungs a favor. And yeah, he's just there's other characters that show up. It's kind of like a lot of it takes place at the house, and there's basically there's older people figures from Liz's life that show up and cause a little bit of a stir, and one of them is very averse to Paul and like basically thinks he's just an abuser and like calls him out for what he is, and used to love or used to have feeling or like romantic inclinations, I think, for Liz, and that was kind of lost, obviously, and it's kind of water under the bridge as far as I know. But yeah, and then I think her brother shows up, I think, and he is also, I think, I don't know if it's him or this old flame of hers shows up and is basically like tells it like it is to about Paul, and says that like, listen, like your father was like, you take after your father, like you tried when you grew up with this abusive father, and like now instead of like escaping from that, you're going back to him in the form of Paul, and like you're just like setting yourself up for disaster. And it's like kind of a rough, kind of tough love moment that I found. Like it's just like, ooh, like that is a little bit too close to home. But yeah, this yeah, Liz is, there's a lot of like poetic moments too, like in the midst of the mundane, like in between all these different affairs and like these very dramatic, over the top, almost cartoonish-esque things that are happening in Africa, like the whole entire world is just kind of seems to be crumbling, and Paul is just like stirring her, and like she has no point, like right from the get-go, she's like talking about taking a couple of days off just to herself, just to kind of regain her composure and her sanity, rather than being kind of at the wind, totally just beaten around like a rag doll, basically, through Paul's, not literally, like, not, but like through his like diatribes and like long invectives. So yeah, but there are moments when she like goes outside and she'll like look at like the world outside kind of from the outside, like kind of subjective, qualitative experience, maybe like her trying to add up and like try to make sense of life, and she's like looking around and she's like describing the trees and like the poetic, it takes on a very poetic tenor, I think. And then she says, I think this is one of the quotes that she says, "Have you ever seen the sunrise here?" As though she had answered, she hadn't, as though she had answered at all, especially in winter. "You'll see it in winter. It's moved up south, where the river's its wildest, and it comes up so fast. It's as if it just wanted to prove the day, get it established so it can loiter through the rest of it, spend the first, excuse me, screen fell asleep there, spend the first damned half of your life complicating things in the eagerness to take on everything and straighten it all out, like one second half cleaning up the mess you'll find on the first, and that way, and that's when they don't understand. Finally, you realize you can't leave things better than you found them. The best you can do is try not to leave them any worse." and that they won't forgive you, and that it's that at the end of the day, like the sun is going down in the Key West, if you've ever seen that. They're all up there for the sunset, watching it like a bucket of blood, clapping and cheering the instant it disappears, cheer you up in the door and damned glad to see the last of you. Sorry, I don't know why I should have magnified that so I wasn't like struggling to read it. But yeah, that's like a very kind of almost like a the poetry maybe of the mundane, I guess, like the quotidian everyday reality we face ourselves in. And I thought that was, yeah, I like the bucket of blood, like clapping. Like, I like that kind of imagery. It really does kind of incite, like, longing, I guess. Like, just, like, this idea, like, again, like, kind of, like, he was pretty kind of ahead of his time in a sense, Gaddis, because he was, like, pointing out, like, how the hypocrisy of this male-dominated house, not to get too political, but, like, he's of just, like, these, toxically, just overly domineering, just like, oh, like, we're gonna, fix the world, and he paints himself as a hero, Paul, in reality he's a coward, because, he was a war hero, I think, he calls himself he's an ex, kind of, served in, I don't know what war, I don't know if it's, I'd imagine the Vietnam War, maybe the Korean War. But yeah, he makes himself out, he boasts of himself to be out like this great kind of hero. But like in actuality, Paul is actually a coward. He fudges, he's a hypocrite, he evades the truth. He's a compulsive lead, so he's constantly, he's just like cooking up these conversations and like, I don't know what, I gotta do this. And one second he's talking about just like hating I hate these African people and like thinking they're lesser people, and then in the next second he's talking about like Christian virtue, and it's just very contradictory. I feel like I've seen this kind of guy. Luckily less and less of them, hopefully. One can only hope. But yeah, he's really this guy, and I feel really bad for Liz being stuck in this situation. Like, this is really a historical kind of almost like a factual kind of recognition of just, yeah, this is what the time is like, anywhere from 60s, 70s, or 80s, these kind of families, were still, and then while they might not have been as horrible, maybe as miserable as the Puritan times, maybe even worse so, because it's like, even past the sexual revolution, there was still the kind of vestigial kind of value clashing in kind of middle America that defined a lot of the culture clash that happened in the 90s, I think. So yeah, I think Gaddis was onto something here with like the whole uneven kind of inequality or inequity of the household. So like Liz can barely get a word in edgewise. Anyway, just wanted to emphasize that. But yeah, that's all for Carpenter's Gothic by William Gaddis. I will definitely keep you posted on the next one. I will try to read Recognitions, but it is a very big book. So maybe, but yeah, I'll try my hand at it. Thanks for watching.